I'm honored to be joined by two legends, Peggy Kusinski, Dionne Miller
Wow.
of the Peggy and Dionne show.
Who's here? Who did you invite?
I'm
We're the
taking.
legends. Dionne, get your camera out.
We're off to a great start. I'm taking a chance with two broadcasters that I love. I'm going to be in your chair. I get to be the one asking the questions here. As we get into how you guys broke into this field, to your careers. And Peggy, I'm starting with you. And I got a little help from my former colleague, Lauren Comator, the great Lauren Comator, when she was at The Athletic. She interviewed you. So I got a great study guide. And before I get into the full background, I usually like to ask my guests who played sports for a scouting report. So Peggy Kusinski, give me the basketball player Peggy Kusinski scouting report.
Oh my gosh.
What were you like on the hardwood?
Do we have enough time to talk about how good I was? I mean, seriously. No, I played basketball at Resurrection High School back in the 80s. And I'd like one of the first times that I thought that, wow, I'm pretty good. Jerry Sloan was coaching the Bulls, and the Bulls used to practice at Angel Guardian Gym. And so Angel Guardian, they had Jerry Sloan actually had a girls basketball camp. Can you imagine an NBA head coach today hosting a girls basketball camp? So I go to this camp, and Kathy Sloan, his daughter, was there, and I got to know her from some all-star teams and some, teams that we had been selected to play. And he has this, he's talking in front of the group, and at one point, he looks out and he says, "Where's Peggy?" And everyone's just kind of, like on their knees, one knee down, and you're kind of looking around. You're like, "Which Peggy is he talking about?" And he's like, "Kusinski," and I was like, well, that would be me. And he has me stand up, and he says, "You're pretty good, huh? I saw, you scored 18 points in the like the Mayor Jane Byrne tournament or something like that, and against like Simeon High School." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You can't play a lick of defense." And I was called out in front of the entire camp. And I just thought, oh, wow. And challenge game on. He had us doing those wall sits every single day until your legs were shaking. And by the end of the camp, I got the Defensive Player of the Camp award.
Oh,
So I think I was second team all state. I blew out my knees in state tournament and in city. It was like the city championships or something. I blew out actually one knee, dislocated my kneecap, and then blew out the other knee during state. So I did not play in college. Short, 5'5.5", 5'6". Would have loved to walk on, but unfortunately that did not happen. And so my career came to a crashing halt at 17 years old. Your athletic
Peggy,
career. Let's
Yes,
make that
thank
clear.
you.
Your
Yes.
athletic
Thank you,
career.
Dionne. Dionne, thank you.
This is why I
Goodness
need Dionne,
sakes.
right? Because I make a lot of mistakes, and she's right there to sweep them up.
Peggy, when that basketball career ended, I read that you visited your brother at Southern Illinois, and they had this TV station on called ESPN.
Yeah.
And that was eye-opening for you. What do you remember about first seeing that and maybe this starting to think about, oh, is this something I could do one day?
So I was a communications major in the speech department and drama. And yeah, it was okay. And then I walked into my brother's apartment in Lewis Park in old SIU Carbondale. And the guys were all sitting around watching TV. And I walked behind the couch and walked into their kitchen, and nobody turned around. I mean, like, we called it the boob tube, right? So like they were glued to it. And I kind of looked at them, and I came back into the living room, and I said, "Hey, what are you guys watching?" And one of them turns around and says, "It's this new station called ESPN." And I looked at the screen, and Gail Gardner was anchoring. I don't know if it was like Tom Mees or someone like that. She was anchoring with him on the Sports Center desk. And I looked, and that was my Oprah aha moment that, oh my gosh, women can do this? Like, it was not something that Jeannie Morris was doing it in Chicago, but I was at college, so I didn't really see it. And when I was in high school, it wasn't like I was glued to the TV watching sports. I loved sports, but I wasn't watching the news. A lot of high school students weren't. And so, yeah, that was my aha moment. And I went back to the communications building, found the radio TV department, and immediately switched over and started signing up for everything and just focused on sports.
Dion, before I get to something I read about you in college, I need to ask you: are you still not over the John Elway drive against the Cleveland
Nope,
Browns?
never,
Okay.
never. It still hurts my feelings. My husband watched that documentary and I was like, I have to leave the room. Like it still bothers me to this day. Someone was raving about something John Elway and I was like, he's just gross. I can't do it. I can't do it. I just can't. It still hurts. That and the fumble, Ernest Biner. It's really painful. It's really
So
painful.
you
I'm not
you
over it. Mm-mm.
Hmm.
you grew up a Browns fan,
I
and
did.
you're in college to be an English teacher, correct?
I
That
was,
was your
yeah.
original goal. And tell our
Mhm.
listeners about, I read that you just took a TV course and suddenly everything
Mhm.
changed.
Everything changed. I was at a liberal arts school, so we had to take a communications class, and I was like, "Let me just take this TV class." Now, to be clear, I was at a private Christian liberal arts school. There were 1,200 undergrads. It was super small. So
Wow.
having a communications department was not a thing. Having a TV station was not a thing. It was just to fulfill this communications requirement. And so they had us do pretend news. I mean, that it sounds silly, but that's what we did. And I remember exactly what I was wearing. I pretended I was at a fire and I reported and that red light came on and I made up something and I left there and I was like, "Oh my God." Like my heart was soaring and I was like, "How do I get to do this?" And I was already talking about sports all the time. I lived in a house with like 6 other girls. I was the only one watching ESPN all the time. It was something I already loved. I was already talking about it and so I started looking into like how can I do this as a career? But I was late to the game. Obviously didn't go to a journalism school. So I did some research, and after I figured out if I got an internship, that would help me to learn the industry. So I interned in Sarasota, Florida at ABC 7, which same logo as the one I use now, which is crazy. I interned with Kevin Nagandi, and
Wow.
he taught me so much about I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know
No.
what a VO was. I didn't know how to write a script. I didn't know any of those things. He taught me how to log games and to write scripts and to be on camera and present and all of those things. And so yeah, that's where I made my tape was at that little station. I tried news. It was not for me. I went with a news reporter to the courthouse and I was like, "You do this every day?" Like it was awful. And I just knew I wanted to talk about sports and so yeah, so I interned at ABC 7 in Sarasota and then I got my first job in Billings, Montana. And here we are.
Wow.
It's a great segue to me then asking Peggy about how she did not get the internship at NBC that she was hoping for.
Oh. I I remember it so well. I am not going to say the sports director's name, even though I still
That's fair.
remember it. I took the L from my parents' house on the northwest side of Chicago, downtown to the merchandise mart where NBC was at the time. And I had an interview for a sports internship. And I walked into Hank's office. Oh gosh, did I just say his name? I'm so sorry. Um, I walked into his office and he was so annoyed that he had to do this interview with me. And I mean, who knows? We've all had bad days, right? Who knows what was
Mhm.
going on? But it wasn't like there was any breaking news or anything like that. It was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I walked in and I sat down behind his desk and he reached behind him and took the old Trivial Pursuit game down off the shelf, opened it up, and took out all the orange questions. Well, the cards, would have the different categories, and the orange was always the sports on the bottom. And he just started asking me um, trivia questions.
Oh
The
my
orange,
gosh.
it was awful. It was so bad. First of all, I was interning with a local station in Chicago, not with a network where I should know a little bit about everything, right? And I bombed miserably, and it
Oh,
was almost as if he was happy, like to prove his point, right? And I left, and I was fuming, and I took the L home, and I came back, and I was so mad. I went to the wall phone. um, yes, I know it sounds like 1880s, but it was actually not 1880s. And I called him back and I said, "Hi, this is Peggy Kusinski. I interviewed with you today for that internship. I just want you to know something that just because I didn't know the answers to those questions that you were asking me doesn't mean I don't know how to find the answers."
Oh.
I was so mad. I did not get the job. But I did get the job at the programming department at NBC. Warner Saunders was hosting like a PBS type of show on the weekends, and Warner was in news at the time before he moved over to sports, and he loved doing sports ideas, and so I was constantly feeding him some sports ideas. It ended up being phenomenal for me to be in programming because it was more like today's media guests, sports talk radio. It wasn't like sitting at the anchor desk. It was more about finding a story, making it interesting, and knowing how to book guests. It was one of the best internships I could have ever asked for
Oh, that's
looking
awesome.
back. So it worked out for me, and who knows where Hank is today.
We'll get into now the first full-time jobs. And Dionne, you mentioned Billings, Montana.
Uh-huh.
Tell us how you got that job.
When I was sending out my resume tape, I sent it everywhere. I mean, everywhere that had an opening, I would send. I think it was like $3.95. I think I remember it's $3.95 to send every VHS tape out that I
Oh my
had, and I
God.
sent them all over the country. I mean, there were some places where I sent it, and I was like, "Dear Lord, please don't send me to Alaska." But then I remember I was out with a friend, and I was applying for jobs. My internship was the fall of 2000 into the start of 2001, like through that year. And obviously we had 9/11. And when that happened, all the hiring stopped, like nothing was happening. So I ended up interning a lot longer than I anticipated. And so it was February of 2002, and I was out to dinner with a friend, and I got a call from this guy in Billings, Montana. And he said, "We'd like you to come." And I don't even think he had it all out of his mouth. And I was like, "Yes, I'll take it." I mean, just give me a job. Just give me a job. And when I had interned, one of the news anchors there told me, she's like, "You just need to get on the carousel. You can change horses once you get there. Like whatever job is offered to you, just get your ticket on, and then you can figure it out." And I always remembered that. And so I was like, "I'll do it." So I was the number 3 in a 3-person sports department at a startup duopoly. So we were ABC, Fox. We were starting from scratch. We had a virtual set, which was a disaster in Billings, Montana. There were, I want to say, like 18 of us that started this station from nothing. It was like an extension of college is kind of how because I didn't have like college experience. That's how I equated it to
Yeah.
that. I could not have picked it out on a map. I loaded my Nissan Sentra and I drove across the country. I didn't have cell service for a large portion of my drive because this was early 2000s and I had a Sprint phone, like God forbid, and it didn't work in the Dakotas, and so I drove across the country. I got 3 speeding tickets in like 4
Oh
hours
no.
across. That was one of my, yeah, I was singing at the top of my lungs and I got pulled over like 3 times. It was awesome.
What was the
And I
song?
got there.
What was the song?
I was singing Alicia Keys. I mean, who wasn't at
Yeah,
that
yeah.
time? I mean,
Fair.
naturally.
New
And winning
York.
all the awards. Oh, yes, I'm sure. Yeah. Anyway, so I was and that's how I ended up how I got started, and we all got together, and you don't need 3 people in a sports department in Billings, Montana, but I got so much experience there. I was a camera person, I was a producer, I was a fill-in anchor. My claim to fame in Montana is that 6 months in, I got tackled filming a football game and broke my leg in 3 places. 6 months
Wow.
into my first job, and people said, are you gonna keep working in this business?" And it, like, never occurred to me to quit, but that was a massive, like, moment for me because it was, I'm thousands of miles from my family. I don't know a lot of people here. My roommate at the time is now, like, my best friend in the world, but, like, had to take care of me. Like, I couldn't it was a wild situation.
Wow.
The whole thing was rinky dink, and yet it was great. The station ended up going under, which is fine. Everyone found jobs, which is fine. And also, ironically, when I was there, at the CBS station was number 1 at the time, and a guy had just gone from Billings to Denver, Colorado. We were all like, "Wow, what a massive market jump." Ryan Shiverini. and
Oh,
can you
okay.
believe that? And
Wow.
everyone raved. He was like the poster child of like getting out of Billings and going somewhere really big. And he came back because he was dating some girl. I can't even say it without laughing. He was dating some girl still in college, I think, or something in Montana. And we were out at a bar one night, and I met him. It's the first time I met him. I was new to the job, to the industry. I mean, never in a trillion years would I think 20-some years later we'd work together. But
Wow.
here we are. Here we are.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, so that was how I got that job. The news director who hired me there didn't last very long. We went through a couple GMs, and then, then the station just folded.
Oh my gosh.
But again, it was a start, and I pretty much everybody we worked with in that moment found something, like went on to something great. And I think that says a lot about, we had really good people that we worked with, and we had so much fun. I mean, like I said, it was like college. It was the experience that I needed. I got to do everything. When we had my broken leg and I couldn't be on air, or I couldn't be in the field, I guess. They had me test infomercial products, and we put that on our morning news.
Wow.
Which, I mean,
Versatile.
listen. I don't know if you know, but like workman's comp, when you're making nothing, is also nothing.
Nothing.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
let me go at least be on camera and get a little more money.
Yeah.
For the small salary, for the pennies that I was making at the time, I needed
Oh.
each and every one of them. So that's what I did. I'm not kidding.
That's
It's so-
beautiful.
yeah.
So
Well,
I
there we
do a
go.
lot of newspapers.com searches as I prepare for these podcasts.
Yes.
And Dionne, unfortunately, there was nothing about the broken leg. The
It's
only
a
thing I
great
find from your time in
paper
yeah,
in
the only,
Shepherd, Montana.
the only thing I found from you in Montana was you picked Marquette in the when they were in they were asking the people, I guess you were one of the journalist celebrities they asked for your pick in the 2003
Wow.
NCAA tournament. Peggy is in newspapers.com a lot. But
That's end the sentence right there.
and
Wait a second. Is it like on the crime page? Is it like
Right? There's
I
no
haven't found those yet. But the first one, Peggy, is, and you can kind of get into how you got to ESPN. But the first one I found was from this is January 5th, 1993, in the Saginaw News, because Saginaw High School had a girls basketball player who was a star. And there was an article about how ESPN's Peggy Kusinski, the network's women's basketball expert, is going to come to Saginaw.
Wait, what?
Okay, go on.
I mean, are you thinking could be a different Peggy Kusinski who was working at ESPN in the early 90s?
I was at
No.
ESPN in the early 90s as a field
Yes, you were.
producer. I was not a women's college basketball expert. I'm trying to
But that's
remember
what they called you.
why.
Would you have gone to
Who
go
says
interview?
no?
Yeah,
Yeah, would you have gone to do something like this?
yes. Yes, I probably would have done it as a field producer. They wanted me to go, it could have been for like Scholastic Sports America, the old show that
That's
Chris
what
Fowler.
yes, it was it was ESPN Scholastic Sport. Yeah, Scholastic Sports America.
That's
Okay.
cool.
I actually got to do a couple of stories for them on air. That was Chris Fowler that was his baby when he got to ESPN, and they had a couple of like correspondence. So I did get to do a couple of stories for Scholastic Sports America. Gosh, I can't believe that you found that. Like, I remember doing a story about a cyclist here in the Chicago suburbs. He was in high school. I remember I also did a story about a high school girl who was climbing like Mount Everest or something. But I don't really remember the Saginaw, Michigan story. But
Well, you
yeah.
were working 6 p.m. to 3 a.m.? Was that your
Yes.
original
Yeah. So
shift there?
I got
Wow.
hired at ESPN to be a production associate, a PA. And I was on the 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift. It was so much fun. A lot of college basketball. As a production assistant, you were assigned a game. You went into the booths where all the TVs were. And, you say it was a DePaul game back then. And I would have to watch the game and you log every single play. Thus, that's why I still watch games the same way today. I log every single play. And then afterwards, you have to decide what the best highlights are. You go into an edit booth with an editor and you would cut the highlights and write a shot sheet for the talent.
Mhm.
And back then, it was typically John Saunders, Dick Vitale, Jimmy Valvano. Trying to think who else was in the studio at that time. And you would try to like think of their tempo, their speed, how they like to talk, and you would write the shot sheet for them, hand it to them. And a lot of times they never had a chance to rehearse it. They would literally just look at the shot sheet while they're doing it, the voiceover
Mhm.
live for the college basketball shows. But we had so much fun. One of my favorite stories. I have to, if I can remember it correctly. We would have to wait until the last game was over, and it was always, West Coast games. Sometimes it would be like 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and um, they would ask the peons to go start the talent's cars in the parking lot. It was, Bristol, Connecticut, freezing cold, and so we would go outside and start the cars for them. And one of the PAs, um, Tom, oh my gosh, he comes in and what did he say? He said, "Hey, I'm trying to move my car, but somebody has their Camaro blocking mine." And so we're all in the studio and everyone's just kind of looking around and everyone's like, "I have a Camaro. Who's got a Camaro? No one's got a Camaro." And this guy, he was such a cartoonish character. He was a very funny guy. And he comes in again, his shoulders are slumped, and he's like, "Guys, somebody's Camaro is blocking my car and I can't get out." And John Saunders is sitting at the anchor desk and he leans back and he's like, "Hey, Tom, is that a Camaro?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Are you sure it's not a Carrera, a Porsche Carrera?" And he goes, "Camaro, Carrera, what's the difference?" And we were like, "Oh my gosh." We would go out at 2:30 in the morning, the whole group. There was a bar, like White Pine or something like that. Right across the street, and they would stay open for ESPN. And one night we went in there, and Dick Valvano and uh, I'm trying to think who else was there, and there were hangers on who started to catch on that the on air talent was there, and well, one woman came and asked for an autograph, um, and, she didn't know who was who, and, it
Oh
was it
gosh.
was Dickie V and Jim Valvano, and Dickie V, she says, "Are you Jim Valvano?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I'm Jim Valvano, I could be Jim Valvano." And, she's like, "Would you give me an autograph?" And he's like, "Sure." And she opens up her chest and hands him a pen, and he writes, "Love, Jimmy V." I mean, and it was like Sharpie marker. I mean, we had so much fun. Like Dion was saying, those days of scrapping and working 12-hour
Mhm.
shifts, and you're just trying to make rent, was so much fun. I mean, truly. And I came in the back door of, through the as an associate producer. I went from production assistant to associate producer, before I made my move to find on air. So, but it was so much fun.
I wanted to ask Peggy, did you see any opportunities to get on air at ESPN? Like, why did you ultimately come back to Chicago? How did you end up back in Chicago and on air?
So it's funny. Marty Glickman was in New York, and he was this guy that would do help with giving you coaching, on air coaching. And they just kept saying I was too Chicago. I was too Chicago. I had too much of a Chicago accent. And, I mean, Scholastic Sports America gave me a couple of opportunities. And so I knew that I had to break away from there. I mean, you don't go from production assistant to on camera at ESPN. And so I knew I had to break away. So I kept we knew the guy that was working. There was a solo Fox sports anchor in Hartford, Connecticut. And I told him, gosh, if you ever need anything, let me know. And maybe on my days off, I needed to do stuff on camera. I had nothing. And so he took off Thanksgiving and Christmas one year, and I filled in. I had never anchored in my
Wow.
life. In my life. It was so bad. It was awful, but I had to get it out of the way. I had to learn. I had to figure it out. And then from there, I had something on tape. I had was planning on leaving ESPN in 1993. It was winter of 92 into 93, and I was going to go work the Olympics in France. And I just started sending tapes out, like Dion was saying, like, oh my gosh, those VHS tapes. I mean, to get someone to make a copy for you, you basically were indebted to them for life. Feel like, can you please dub this off for me? And I sent out probably 80 tapes and got a call from Pennsylvania, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Same thing as Dion. It was a Fox and ABC station. So they did the news at 10, and then they did it again at 11 for the Fox
Mhm.
station. And when I showed up there, I didn't have a credit card. I mean, we didn't have credit cards. We didn't have cell phones back then. We had those big bag phones that were only for
Yeah,
work. You
yeah.
didn't have your own cell phone. And I, I got this job to fill in for their one sports anchor. Who they wanted to send to spring training. And so I was going to do 2 nights of 4 sportscasts. And I was like, oh, I drove through the blizzard, my entire car packed up in my entire apartment packed up in my car,
Mhm.
drove to Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I get there. The news director, his entire office was filled with those little stuffed animals that you get in that claw machine where you like at truck stops. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'm looking around his office. It was so weird. And I said, "Well, where can I stay tonight?" And he said, "Well, you're on your own. You can ask if, anyone in the newsroom if, they have a spare room or a couch or something like that." And there was no one in the newsroom that I didn't know anybody. And so I went to the motel across the
Mm.
street who left the lights on for me. And I said that I was with the TV station across the street. Lo and behold, they had a corporate account. They gave me a room without a credit card. They gave me a room. I had a room to stay. I slept there. The next day, I do the sports, and I never got paid because they found out that I stayed at the motel. And the guy said to me, like 2 weeks later, we'll just call it even. Like, we'll just call it even. That motel room was like $39 a night.
Right.
And so I never got paid, but I got more tape. So
Mhm.
from there, I made the drive back to Chicago, would listen to the score my entire way through the Poconos and all through Pennsylvania, the longest state you will ever drive through to get to Illinois. And I just listened to the score and I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this one day. It's gonna work. So yeah, it was great. Those were the best
Wow.
times though, Dion, weren't they?
Oh, so much fun. I mean, I
Yeah.
have such fun memories. I had so many different stops and beautiful parts of our country and lifelong friends I made at each one. Like that to this day, I talk to people from every stop in my career, and I think that's pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
Deanna, I was going to ask you because I see Vermont, San Diego,
Mhm.
back to Florida before
Mhm.
Ohio.
Mhm.
I'm just curious. I mean, the general question is like, what was it like bouncing around? And then more specifically, like, if you have favorite memories or favorite moments from those stops.
yeah, I mean, each one was unique in its own. When I loved Burlington, Vermont. That place is so beautiful. I still like to this day. It's such a quaint like college town, and that was another extension of college for me because I had never really lived in a college town. My college was not like that. One of my dear friends, she's now an associate athletic director at the University of Vermont. I was there at a great time. They beat Syracuse in the NCAA tournament. You would have thought they won the whole thing. It was unbelievable. The other day, I found all my ESPN magazines with the head coach from Vermont at the time, Tom Brennan, and Taylor Coppenrath was their big star from like nowhere, Vermont. I mean, I loved it. I loved being a part of it. I was a one-man band there. And I learned a lot about hockey, which now comes in super handy in my life. But that's when the first time I'd ever really been around the sport. And it was so important then to them. And we would go to Montreal because it was so close, and we'd go to Canadiens games, which was amazing. And that was super fun. San Diego was cool because it was the first time I had a photographer. First time I had a producer, an editor. I had people who did these things. Like, are you like all I have to do is write? Are you kidding me? Like, it was so wonderful. And I got to cover pro sports for the first time in San Diego, which was very, very cool. LaDainian Tomlinson played for the Chargers at the time, which was awesome to cover. The Padres went to the playoffs. It was the first time I covered playoff baseball. First time I ever went to spring training. Like, just so learning some of those things. First time I ever got fired, which is also fun. I was in San Diego for exactly a year, a little over a year. And it turned out to be the biggest blessing, but it was scary. I mean, it was scary. I had moved from, like, I had bounced around, nothing in the Midwest. Can you tell? Like, it was like Montana, Vermont, San Diego, and I was so far from my own reality. My parents were still in Florida, 3 hours behind or ahead of my life. And I just felt disconnected out there. And I didn't realize it until later. And when I got laid off, I was devastated. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I'm a very type A hard worker, team player, like whatever you need. And I just felt so like, what? Like, I felt lost in the moment. And so many things had happened before I even got there, that connections that I had made, jobs that I thought I wanted and didn't get. And those connections helped me after I got laid off to get where I am today, to be married to my husband, to have the family I do. So it was like it worked out the right way. In the moment, you're like, it shatters your identity and it makes you uneasy about, can I even do this job? But I was there for a little over a year, and then I was offered a chance to freelance at the ABC station in Sarasota because Nagandi had gotten hired at ESPN, and then their weekend guy, his name was Lowell Galindo, he started ESPNU. So they both left at the same time, and there was no one in Sarasota. So the news director was like, would this be good timing? Do you want to come home? And I had just gotten laid off, and I was like, wow, this is a miracle. I went home, and I was like the only sports person in my hometown for about 6 months, which was kind of fun. It was a kind of fun experience. And it's like I got to do some cool things there. I didn't have to shoot my own stuff, but I was still producing and editing myself. And I think those are valuable skills to have. And then, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed being home. That was really fun. And then I got the job in Columbus with my now husband. We started a network there. The network did not last, but we got married anyway, so we win. And then and we ended up doing 4 years at Fox Sports Ohio at the time. Now I think it's called something else, FanDuel or something. But we were doing Fox Sports Ohio, Big Ten Network. I did when I was there. And I was born in Ohio, diehard Buckeye fan. I mean, I remember driving into Columbus and thinking, I cannot believe I get to go into the Horseshoe every 8 Saturdays a year and cover the team that I've grown up cheering for. And I got to interview Jim Tressel and all the time, and Urban Meyer, and it was the coolest thing. I loved living in Columbus. I loved the opportunity I had to do pre and post game shows for the Cavaliers. We had a couple years with LeBron before the decision, and then a couple years without LeBron. So that was really fun. I was in Boston right before the decision that summer of 2010 when he ripped off his jersey and he was so mad. And I remember that. Shaq was on the team. It was so much fun. Anthony Parker, Candace's brother, was on the team. Antoine Walker came. I mean, it was just that was a really big highlight for me, was to be covering a pro team in that regard, which was very, very cool. And I loved it. I loved freelancing for Big Ten Network. That was super fun. I did so much stuff I did a couple packages with football, which was super cool. The first game I ever did, gosh, I'm rambling. The first game I ever did though was Penn State. I'd never been to Penn State. I had never been to Happy Valley. And that was the first game that I did. And Glenn Mason, who used to coach, he was our analyst. And after the game, in Happy Valley, there's one tiny airport you come in and out of. And so there was one flight that left late and our game was at noon or whatever. And after the game, Coach Mason was like, so Joe Paul wants us to come over to his house. And I was like, excuse me? This is my first time covering big time college. I'm like, I'm going to go to Joe Paterno's house and have dinner with him and his wife. It was just wild to me. And then all the things that came out afterwards made it even more wild. But I digress. I had loved sports so much and I knew so much about it that the fact that I was rubbing shoulders with these people was mind-boggling to me. It still is unbelievable that I got to do so many cool things in that kind of in that role that I was in Ohio. But during that time, we were freelancers. We were not, my husband and I both, we were not full-time employees. And then then I had a baby and we didn't have like maternity coverage and health insurance. And, my husband said one of us needs a full-time job with benefits. And he thought I was more marketable. So I flew to Chicago and I interviewed with Fox 32 and I met with the people at Comcast Sportsnet and I met with the Big Ten people in person, hoping they would give me a full-time job. And that didn't happen. I got hired at Fox 32 that fast. And I've been here ever since. Wow, that was a long answer to your question. But I say all of that to say it's been a super fun journey. Like, I feel like every stop I've had has been so cool. And since I've been here, gosh, like when I think about all the things I've gotten, the second year I was here, I was covering a Stanley Cup run. It's insane to me. Then they won it again, and I got to be at another parade, and then the Cubs, and then Loyola, and then it's like what am I? This is not a job. This is so much fun. Like it's such a treat to me to get to like tell these stories and be in this city, and it means a lot to me. And not being from here, I feel like I've been embraced in a way that I didn't expect, and it's been awesome. It's been awesome, and now I get to do radio too, like with Peggy. When I was hired, they asked me if I could be like Peggy Kusinski. That was what was requested of me
Wow.
at Fox 32. I
Yeah.
mean, those were the actual words he said. If you could be like Peggy Kusinski, we would really love
Oh my
it.
God.
And I was
And
so
have
intimidated
you
by
been
her.
like Peggy Kusinski?
I mean, here's what I will say. I think Peggy and I are both fiercely competitive, and we definitely want to dig to get the story right. We want to tell it in our own unique voice. We don't want to do what everybody else is doing. We want to do what we think is the best story, and we want to ask questions that are real questions, and we care about getting it right. And that definitely, I mean, she's such an example to me. I am telling you, it is awesome to call her friend, but man, she drove me for the first 5, 6 years that I was here. I was like, I have to keep up with her. I have to keep up with her. I have to, and nothing. I love the stories of when I would come into the media room at House Hall, and Peggy was already typing, and I would walk in and with
Oh,
a
because you
smile,
could
I'd be
hear
like,
her
oh.
typing from outside
Yes,
the
Stop
room?
it.
yes,
Stop it.
something like that. But she was already typing, and I would walk in, and I'd be like, "Oh, hey, Peggy," and sit down and be like, "What? How does she already have a story? Like, what am I missing? What did I miss?" Like, I felt like I was always trying to keep up, and but I think that made me better at my job. I truly believe that, and I think in each spot that I landed, finding people like that who had the more experience than I did, who understood the market more than I did, who were more familiar with the stories that we were covering. I think that was important for my growth, just to watch that and learn from that. And that was key in every stop that I made, because I was the newbie. I would not come in there and be like I was owed anything. I was trying to learn. And I felt like it was smarter to kind of step back and watch the veterans who knew it and learn from that, and then like respond the right way. You know what I mean? And I think that's been key in me being able to find my footprint in each little market that I was in, and then now here in Chicago.
Well, Dionne, you did take like my next 3 questions, which is good.
You knew I would.
It's good. No, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. And here's how I'm going to set this up for you,
And
Peggy,
we're out of time.
I know, right? As I was doing it, I was like, Dionne, stop talking, stop. But I had to finish the story.
No, it was a great. I was going to get to
Yeah.
all of those things. I'm glad you hit them. Anyways, this is great. So, Peggy, the way I'm going to set this up very big picture for you. You can take it how you want to take it, because I mentioned that when I do newspapers.com searches, the reason you're in there so much is because every time the sports page was on CLTV, it would say in the newspaper,
Oh,
it would
that's
say the
right.
sports page,
Yeah.
9 p.m., Peggy Kusinski. So
Uh-huh.
every single time it's there. So you've got the sports page, you hosted the sports huddle on the radio. And actually, I found, by the way, it was June 6, 1994. I think this was maybe a Jim Kirk story at the Tribune, but it said in like the way bottom, it just said Peggy Kusinski, Joby Smith, and Bob
Urzik, yeah.
are taking turns hosting CLTV's sports page while a permanent replacement for Lance McAllister is sought. And then obviously you hosted that for a long time. And then I also have in my notes how many times you sent the resume to NBC, or that was, to eventually land there. Again, I'm like kind of summing up like your kind of 7 years here between when you come back to Chicago and when you landed NBC. So I'll let you just kind of take it from there in terms of the important moments. And you're also, obviously, I didn't even mention the Loop. on the radio there
Yeah.
too. So doing all those different things throughout throughout the 90s.
I got
What stands out from those memories?
Well, that was, like, really my big break, to be honest with you, because I didn't really have, on-air experience. I think I had a total of, 1, 2, 6 sportscasts on camera, and, I sent Chicagoland TV was just starting in Chicago, and so I had sent my resume, and, Mike Adams was the news director at the when they were starting up, and they had already he said, "We've already hired all of our on-air people." But you're kind of interesting. I'm going to take a shot. If you want the job as the number 3 sports person, you know, offering it to you. But if it doesn't work out because you're really raw, then maybe you could be a producer. And I was a producer, at ESPN in Bristol, basically. So I was like, okay, deal. I get to work in Chicago in my hometown. Are you kidding me? I did not see that coming. It wasn't expected. And so I started at CLTV, and he said, let me just give you one piece of advice. And I was like, all ears, by all means. He said, tell sports like you talk when you're talking to people, like you're in a bar and you're just hanging out talking. And I looked at him, I said, "Well, that's not a problem because that's pretty much where I've learned everything about sports." And, I mean, like, you're sitting around, at the table with I have 7 brothers, so it's like people are talking sports. You're, walking around the kitchen with your brothers. You're, hanging out with your friends in the neighborhood bar, and everyone's talking sports. And so you could kind of, test out your knowledge by whether or not the guys would include you in the conversation. And, I thought that was phenomenal advice because when I really thought about it that way, yeah. So then I started doing CLTV. First call-in show in Chicago on TV. The calls that we would get, oh my gosh! I mean, we would have Cubs players come on. I had Stan Mikita, the Blackhawks. I had Jerry Reinsdorf in studio. We had people come in. And then you're opening it up to the phone lines, and they got to ask questions. Well, let me tell you, there were times that, I had to do everything to not laugh because we knew that people were just punking us, but it was so much fun. That was, like, my huge break in Chicago. Kevin Matthews show on, they had moved from The Loop, to they moved to call letters a couple of different times, and, Mark Giangreco was his sports guy, and, Giangreco would do the 10 o'clock at ABC 7, and then he'd have to be up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., whatever time, for the morning show with Kevin Matthews. And so Marky Mark started, oversleeping a few times, and, they called me out of the blue and said, "Would you like to fill in for Mark Giangreco as the sports person?" So I would do the same thing. I would do the 10 o'clock at CLTV. We were out in Oak Brook, Illinois. I'd
Wow.
drive back where I lived in Lincoln Park and then ride my bike, to the studios at the Hancock Building and I started filling in, and it was so much fun because what radio allows you is, a bigger format. So instead of 3 minutes, or if you're a reporter,
Mhm.
you get maybe 90 seconds to tell your story, radio, you had a full show and you could talk and throw it out there. And it also gave me an opportunity to really kind of find my personality voice. And it allowed me to be myself. And those two combinations, the Kevin Matthews show and CLTV, like that was it for me. That was really, but I don't even know how many resumes I sent. I would drop off tapes at NBC 5. I interned there, so I thought, eventually people are going to remember who I am. And when I finally did get the job there, um, they said, we have, it's just part time, and we're basically going to try out you, David Kaplan, and Tom Thayer as our sports features person. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I'm going up against Cap and former Bear? Like, no way." But I just hustled my ass off, and eventually they
Mhm.
offered me, the job, and I stayed for, I think, I was at NBC 17-ish years. Um,
Wow.
the day I started was the week I started was 9/11. And I was pregnant with my twins. And all I remember thinking is, oh boy, what is happening here? And am I going to have to tell them that I'm pregnant with twins when I'm just starting this job? So, yeah, it was something. It was, I mean, it was just so much fun. So much. It's been
Mhm.
so much fun. And to be back on radio, like Dionne was saying, it's just the best. It really is.
Let's tell you guys can just decide how to tell it. This is an origin story podcast, so tell the origin story of how the Peggy and Dionne show came to be on ESPN 1000.
We might have two different stories, but I think it's kind
I
of the same. I think.
I mean, all I remember, I don't know who Danny Zetterman called first.
That's
Was it you?
I think he called
I don't
I think
know.
he called me first, and he was my son, who was in college trying to get an internship. He had reached out to ESPN 1000, and Danny Zetterman said, "Oh, Jason, COVID, we're not having interns, but if your mom is ready to come out of retirement, let us know." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Mom, look at this
Yeah.
response I got." And I was like, so I called Danny, and I was like, what do you have in mind?" And he said, "Would you host a show?" And I was like, "I don't want to work that much anymore." I really didn't. And he said, "Well, it would be Saturdays for 2 hours." I'm like, "Hmm, okay. Well, I'm interested." And I said, "Yeah, but I have to be with somebody that I really like. I don't want that radio drama and everything." And he said, "Well, who do you have in mind?" And I said, "Well, who do you have in mind?" And he said, "What about Dionne Miller?" And I'm like, "Yes." I was like, "Yes." Because we always got along, and we would
Yeah.
huddle, even on the road covering the Bears. Like we worked at two different stations, but and back then people weren't as friendly. Like the TV
Mhm.
people were very, very competitive. And even the newspaper people were competitive and kind of stayed with their own newspapers. And Dionne and I just always hit it off. We could huddle and be like talking nonstop. And so, yeah, I
Yes,
mean that's
absolutely.
my
So I
story.
remember I remember I was at the Mighty Seven. I got a call from Danny. It was so weird. I had done I think one season of pregame show for Bears before Bears were on ESPN 1000, I think. And then I can't remember. But he had called and he said, "So I have this idea. I'm wondering if you'd want to do more like a radio show on Saturdays." And I was like, "Well, I already work Saturdays, so that's not, inconvenient." And then he said it would be with Peggy. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like, when do we start?" And I remember I called her right after that. And I think she just picked up and started laughing. And so did I, and I think we laughed through our entire first 2 hours of the
Oh my gosh,
show.
the first show, all we did was laugh, and
It
we're
is.
like looking on our like social to see if there was any reaction, and people were like, "Are, are they still laughing? Like,
I know.
are they saying anything?" And to be honest with you, like we're both like, "Listen, it's Saturday. We don't have
Mhm.
to rehash what everybody has talked about. We'll get into the biggest stories, absolutely. But can we just have conversation, and we're real people? Let's talk about what's going on at home. Let's talk about,
Yeah.
our frustrations. Or sometimes there's like a story that I'll be like, I have a lot to say about this. This one really bothers me. And we're just two women who love sports, have very good careers, and we're it's the old Kathy and Judy from WGN radio, but it's on ESPN. It's on sports, radio, and I think it works. I think it works. We have
I
we have so
I
much
I
fun.
we have so much fun, and I think the reason it works is because most of the time we think no one is listening.
Yes.
I mean, that's like most of the time it's just us talking, and we don't talk much in between shows. So we come in, and even before, like, this is why we're always, if you hear the beginning of our show, we're always like scrambling because we just start talking. And one thing that like blesses my life is just like her experience as a mom and a wife and those things that I am like right on her heels doing, and like just relating in that way. And I think our authentic relationship is why it's interesting for people to listen. I think
Mhm.
because there's nothing convoluted about what we're doing. And we will start a topic and end up somewhere else and look at each other and be like, I don't know how we got here. And
Right.
I think that part is when you're listening in the car, you're kind of the key, I think, to good radio is that people are in their car and they're talking to you, like talking to the radio because they're involved in the conversation. And I feel like our listeners feel that way. I don't know if you get that, Peggy, but I feel like
Yeah.
when they call in, they're like, I had to call because you guys mentioned this and I was saying this. And I think that has been what's worked about the show. It's fun. I look so forward to it. You don't even know. Like it's such a treat. It's a really, really, we have a really good time.
It's our coffee klatch, and
And it
people are invited. So what if there's wine in my coffee cup? I mean,
I mean, you're right.
seriously. I
No
mean,
one
come
knows. No
on.
one
Like,
knows.
I got last 2 questions for both of you, and these are questions I ask everybody. So my first is for each of you guys to think of your welcome to the big leagues moment. Now, you've already told some great stories from early on in your career, and I've had people say it's the first time they made a big mistake, or the first time a coach or
Mm.
player yelled at them, or the flip side, the first time they realize, oh, I kind of made it, and like, look who I'm sitting next to, or look how many people recognize me. You can take it whatever way you want, but when you think of welcome to the big leagues moment, what was that for you in your career?
Jeez. I'm gonna let you go
oh,
first. I
wow.
don't know.
I think for me, I remember I was a associate producer at ESPN, and I was doing a story. They wanted me to go get sound from Bears practice, and Mike Ditka was coaching. And Fred Mitchell from the Tribune was kind enough. He said, "Oh, Fred Mitchell," and I said, "Peggy Kusinski. I'm an associate producer at ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut." And he said, "Oh, are you asking questions at the press conference?" And they were at the old Lake Forest College. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Be prepared." He said, "Be prepared. If you're asking anything that could get under his skin, he's going to throw it right back at you." And I thought, "Oh, wow. Okay." I hadn't really thought of it that way before. And so I think that that was oh, you have to be quick on your feet. You have to have a
Mhm.
comeback. You have to always be ready if they throw it back at you. So for me, that was oh, and sure enough, that's what happened. Ditka was like, "Well, I don't know why. Why do you think that?" And I had to then, say it. So for me, that was where I think I can do this, but truly where I felt like, "Hey, I think this is working," was Lovey Smith. Man, Lovey would be like, "Peggy, well, Peggy," and that's when I knew, like, when he would refer to me by name, I was like, "Okay, like, I
Mhm.
belong. I belong." So that was mine.
I'm sitting here like racking my brain, and I don't know that I ever feel like I've arrived anywhere. I'm being totally honest. Like I push and push and push still. I still did I say it the right way? Did I write that well? Did I ask a good question? I'm still that way. I prepare and prepare. What you said about preparation, Peggy, like that is my MO. I am constantly because I know that I there's still something to learn. I know that there isn't an end to my becoming a broadcaster. Like, to me, that there's no end to that. To me, there is always ways to sharpen my skills and meet my viewer or listener in a different way than I did the time before. And our industry is changing so much that I feel like, okay, how do we creatively meet them where they're at on their phone or give them something they're not getting anywhere else. So these are things that like I think about. So for me to say like, is there a moment? I don't think so. I mean, I even go through some of the amazing things I've gotten to do and the people that I've gotten to talk to, and I don't think of a moment that I was like, "Okay, this is where I belong." I always go home and think, "How could I have done it better next time?" Like, what can I learn from that to do better next time? There are certain moments that for sure stand out to me. I mean, I remember in San Diego doing a live shot with LaDainian Tomlinson. This is why he stuck out so much to me. And we're standing there after he had an incredible game. and Pipsqueak little Dionne is standing next to him, and I'm like ready to do my live shot, and they're chanting MVP, MVP, and I just looked at him. I was like, "That's pretty cool, isn't it?" And he's like, "Yeah, it is." And it was like,
That's
oh,
awesome.
like and someone took a picture of us, and that's why I remember that moment. And it just was my first time around pro sports that way, that I felt like, okay, I'm getting somewhere, but I never feel like I've reached the end of that. I just don't. I feel like there is so much still. There's more that I can try, or more that I can do, or I want to be so good at this job. I want at all the jobs. Like, I want to be so good at it. I don't just want to fill airtime. I really want to be good at it. And I still push myself to do
Isn't
that.
that, Kevin, isn't that crazy to hear Dionne say this? She works at the number one TV station in Chicago. She is a host on the Chicago Bears radio network for the pregame show. She has a Saturday show, the only women-led sports talk show, and yet she's never satisfied. Like, she's
Mm-mm.
always trying to be better and wants to be in that that space of people saying she's already proven it that
Yeah.
she's one of the best, and yet she's still not like satisfied. It blows my mind.
Well, when you
Well,
work alongside a college women's basketball expert like I do, I mean,
well,
I'm
I was gonna
always
say,
chasing.
I know Dion's listened to a few episodes of the podcast, and she probably knows that the other person who gave me a similar answer to the Welcome Big Leagues moment was Joe Buck. So maybe Dion wants to be in the same category as Joe, but it speaks to this idea that even someone like Joe Buck too, it's like you just there's something in you that's like I gotta
Mhm,
keep going. And I will say
mhm.
one of my Welcome to Big Leagues moments was when early days of covering the Bears, I met Peggy Kusinski, and I told her I remembered her speaking in my high school, and she yelled at me. So.
'Cause you would be the second person that said that to me, as, Megan Mawicki was working at Channel 2 at CBS, and we were in Platteville, Wisconsin, at the Bears'
Oh,
old
wow.
camp, and she came up to me and she said, "I used to watch you when I would come home from school." And I was like, I'm like, "How old are you? Like, how old are you?" And then she was like, "Oh, no, 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 I meant when I'd come home from college." I was like, "Oh my
Mm.
gosh."
Mm.
Yeah.
Last question, and Dion, I think what you were just saying is it's a good segue to this, but this is kind of accidental, but we're talking the day after National Girls Women's in Sports Day. I don't know why there isn't a National Men and Boys in Sports
'Cause that's
Day,
every
right?
day, Kevin.
It's 'cause it's
It's
every
every
day.
day, okay?
With that in mind, and looking at where you guys are at your careers, I'm sure you talk to so many young people. What is kind of your go-to advice? And I think it's interesting because like you guys both came into this industry and it's wildly different, but there's still some very
Mhm.
important things that you still need to have. So if you're talking to young people who are trying to break in, what's kind of your go-to advice for them?
I mean, I start with there are so many more opportunities with like YouTube and social media to create your own niche. I also, but that I feel like there are more opportunities in that regard than just like a traditional news route, which I think is encouraging for young people. But I always tell them, don't compare your journey to somebody else's. I think that was the hardest part for me when I started was like, well, how come they're getting that opportunity? I work as hard, but this industry does not always work that way. And, I thought that I wanted to go to ESPN and I had to work there or I would never feel like I arrived at anything, and that is not the case at all, right? Like, my journey had to pivot, but I was looking at what other people were doing and comparing myself, and I feel like your journey is unique to you, and that's what makes you who you are, and that's what makes your career what it is. So focus on that one step at a time, and the right doors will open for you, not necessarily for anybody else, but for you. And that's what I always tell them, like to focus on what you want to do, not what other people are doing. And that's my number one piece of advice.
I do, I typically, like, tell young women, 2 things, one professional and one, on, like, your personal side. And professionally, I tell women, "Slow down." Like,
Mhm.
slow down. You don't need to get in one report, everything you know, about that player, that team, that whatever. Like women, for whatever reason, tend to throw in a million stats and they try to get so much in to prove that they know it. And what
Mhm.
I've learned, I did the same thing. What I've learned is that just pick out a couple of things that are important, deliver it great, and then make them want to hear more. Because the more you
Mhm.
throw in there, the more they can pick apart and be like, oh, wait, what did she do? Wait, what did she just say? That's not true. So slow down. Less is more, and you'll have more time to be able to get everything else that you know. And then on the personal side, I always tell them it's not easy. And can we have it all? Yes, we can, but there are sacrifices.
Mhm.
And it's really important that you have a partner that really understands what you're both in it together. And because it's hard, as moms, I'm sorry, but dads don't have the same responsibilities at home as moms do, no matter how. And my husband's wonderful, and Dion's husband is wonderful. But the reality is, moms are moms, right?
Mhm.
And it's hard, You celebrate holidays, Christmas, 4 days early because you're going to be in Detroit covering a Bears Lions game. You're not at Thanksgiving because, again, you're doing a Bears Lions game. Nights, weekends, that's when sports happens, right? So don't look at other people and say, oh,
Mhm.
boy, I really wish I had that, because then you're in the wrong industry. Our industry is built on nights and weekends and holidays. It's we bring to the viewers and the sports fans what they do want to get away from their everyday life.
Mhm.
And that's what we signed up for. And it is not easy. It is hard. But if you create what's your norm for your family, then that's all that's important. And
Mhm.
you just have to be real honest about it, because it's not easy for anyone, and men included, Kevin. I know that. I'm not just
Mhm.
saying it's women,
It's not easy.
but it's not easy for everyone. And I just think you have to go in it knowing that there's going to be some bumps in the road.
Yeah, it's great advice. And I wanted to keep you guys a few minutes shorter than Hogan Johns. Let them be the ones that ramble a few. And I think you actually are even shorter than the Mark Potash episode at this point. Um, but I do like to think that our late friends Jeff Dickerson and Moon Mullen, I just
Mhm.
like picture them splitting a bottle of Prisoner, listening to this and
Uh-huh.
smiling,
Aw, yeah.
and enjoying it. And I've had a thrill just getting to know the two of you and be colleagues with you guys. You know how much I admire your work, and I'm so glad you took the time to come on the podcast and tell everyone how you broke in.
It was really fun, Kevin. Thank
Such a
you.
treat. Thank you so much.